Hey, special educators. Welcome to Teach, Taskbox, Inspire, the podcast dedicated to making your job as a special education teacher easier by making your instruction more fun for you and your students. Inside each episode, you'll learn how to get the most use out of your task boxes in the classroom. I'm your host, Lisa Holliday from Chalkboard Superhero, a veteran special education teacher passionate about empowering you with purposeful teaching strategies, helpful tips and tricks, and other classroom management tools that will help you thrive in your role. Let's get started with today's episode. Hey there, special education teachers, and welcome back to another episode of Teach, Taskbox, Inspire. I'm your host, Lisa Holliday, and today we're going to be talking about something I see go wrong all of the time in classrooms. Today, we're talking about reinforcement, what it really is, what it isn't, and why so many of us are unintentionally doing it wrong. All right, so let's start with this. Reinforcement is the reason why things work or don't work in your classroom. It really is the reason your students are learning new skills, why your behavior plans are either successful or failing, and why some behaviors decrease while others just seem to get worse. Reinforcement isn't just a sticker chart or a token economy. And if it's done incorrectly, it's not helping anyone. It might even be hurting your classroom systems. So by definition, reinforcement is something that comes after a behavior that increases the likelihood of that behavior happening again in the future. So let's break that down if you're kind of lost right now. Imagine Johnny walks into the classroom and completely independently, he goes and he hangs up his backpack. He takes out all of his stuff and he puts his homework away and he finds his seat in the classroom. If you go ahead and stick a reinforcer in there, if you respond with a reinforcer, maybe it's a high five or a specific praise, or maybe they have access to a preferred activity, you're increasing the probability that he's going to do that again tomorrow. That is how reinforcement works. So here's the kicker. This applies to negative behaviors too. Let's just say Johnny runs out of the classroom and a bunch of adults go sprinting after him, giving him all that attention he wants, right? Or maybe it's power, or maybe it's just a break from the work. That's reinforcement too. We don't mean to reinforce it, but we did. How exciting it is to have 3 adults just running after you. This used to happen all of the time in my old building last year when I was opening a brand new 613 program, and I had an eloper, somebody who loved to run out of the classroom. Now, we did everything always correctly, where we would put a mat up by the door, we would have somebody standing next to the door, but somehow the specific student always got out. And again, a lot of it was just for attention. And, 2, 3, 4 adults in the building knew. So you have 10 adults chasing after this one student. And how fun is that? And we're not doing it on purpose, but we are unintentionally reinforcing that attention-seeking behavior. We don't mean to do it, but we did. Reinforcement is a universal concept. It's not just for special ed. It's not just for token boards or behavior charts. It's happening with every behavior in every classroom, gen ed or self-contained. All right, let's talk about a non-classroom example, right? Let's talk about, let's say, doing the dishes. I hate doing the dishes. My husband usually is in charge of doing the dishes because I hate them so much. So I do the cooking, he does the dishes. But one night he did the cooking and I didn't want to do them, so I skipped them. And nothing bad happened. I got to relax, scroll on my phone. No one said anything. So the next night, you guessed it, I skipped them again. So that's reinforcement. I was reinforced for not doing the dishes. Because you know what? Scrolling on my phone was a heck of a lot more fun than doing the dishes. The same goes for our students. If a behavior keeps happening, it's being reinforced intentionally or not. Let's kind of talk about where things can kind of fall apart, right? So let's talk about any missteps that we might be doing intentionally or unintentionally in the classroom. Number one, we're not really following the absolute definition of what a reinforcer is. We say we're reinforcing, but if the behavior isn't increasing, then you're not really using a reinforcer, right? So that's clue number one. The reinforcer isn't working. If you're not seeing that behavior increase, whatever you're using isn't reinforcing for that student, right? So let's say you're giving out Skittles for completing math problems, but the student could care less about Skittles. Then they're not motivated. And you might be thinking you're reinforcing this behavior, but you're not, because they could care less about those Skittles. You have to really know your students. And so just like me, if somebody said to me, okay, Lisa, I'm going to be paying you $50 to babysit my child on Saturday, I would say, cool, that's great. I'm down for that. Those 2 hours are going to be amazing, and I'm going to take my $50 and run. But let's say when I got there, they said, actually, I don't have any cash on me. Can I please pay you in Skittles? I would be like, no, that's not going to work for me anymore, because that's not motivating for me. That is not reinforcing, right? The money, the cash in hand is what's reinforcing for me to babysit, right? So this is where the teacher strategy is going to come in. I want you to do 3 things. Number one, you have to take time to observe your students. What lights them up? What do they gravitate toward? You kind of have to watch and write things down of what they like, what interests them. And sometimes this takes days, and sometimes this takes weeks. Sometimes it's just continuously ongoing. Number 2, you need to do some trial and error. So this is where preference assessments can really come in handy, because some things that you try, you can cross off, or maybe you have a list of things that they could choose, or what have you. You need to observe, do some trial and error. And the last thing is really talk to the parents or grandparents or the caregiver, whoever's in charge of these kids. So mom and dad might know, or, sometimes they might know and they don't even know. So sometimes I don't even say, hey, what are the reinforcers that work for them at home? They might say, I don't know. Sometimes I give them an M&M. Really dig into them and say, what does their afternoon schedule look like? What is it they do on the weekends that makes them happy? When they go on long trips or they go to a hotel overnight, what are the things that you're packing for them overnight to keep them happy? These are all the little things that mom and dad might not understand as a reinforcer. And then you're like, oh my gosh, I love that. I didn't realize that they love that. So we'll try to work that into school. I want you to remember that even if something was reinforcing last week, students can get sick of it, right? It's just something that goes over and over and over. So reinforcers are fluid, and we have to meet our learners kind of where they're at. And that means adapting. So if you have a hard student and you're like, I don't know what they want, I could never find a reinforcer, then all of a sudden they love, little cars, and you're like, yes, they love cars. I finally found it. And you go to the store and you spend hundreds of dollars on every last little toy that you can find that looks like a car, and you bring it to them, and all of a sudden 2 weeks later, they're like, okay, I'm over cars. And then you're like, you have to make sure that you keep those lists fluid, because sometimes we have students who might like Thomas the Train for the next decade, but you might have some students who every single week you're trying to find a new reinforcer that will work for them. I had one student one time who loved any type of vestibular input. And so swinging or jumping on the trampoline or scooter rides, and it couldn't just be one thing. We can say, okay, now you're going to work for the swing, because, sometimes you can't always get to the swing. And so you have to kind of have like a bunch of options for these students, right? All right, let's talk about that last clue, right? That second thing that I know that reinforcement is going wrong is when the reinforcement is happening before the behavior. Now, You guys, if the student hasn't done the behavior yet and you're already offering the reinforcer, that's not reinforcement. Sorry, guys, that's bribery. So let's say your student refuses to do math and you're like, okay, if you sit down, I'll just give you some iPad time. And they sit and did it work? Maybe. But they just learned that refusing gets them what they want. So we want reinforcement to come after that desired behavior, and you cannot give it to them before then. So really, first work, then reward. That simple phrase can change your classroom. All right, if there's one thing I want you to walk away with, it's this. Reinforcement is a science, and when we get it right, it's an absolute game changer. It helps our kids learn, grow, and thrive. But if we mess it up, we're spinning our wheels and unintentionally reinforcing the very behaviors we're trying to change. So your challenge this week is watch your students. Track what's really enforcing for them. And be honest with yourself. Are you reinforcing or bribing? And if it's not working, that's okay. Adjust, reflect, and try again. You've got this. And I'm cheering you on every step of the way. This can be hard, guys, and it's our job to figure out what's going to work for each student. That's all I have for you guys today. I hope you took something from this episode and you can use it in your classroom this week. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time, guys, bye-bye. Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Teach, TaskBox, Inspire. I hope you've gained some tips and motivation to fuel your week ahead. If you're ready to explore more strategies for empowering your students as independent learners, be sure to dive into my free training at chalkboardsuperhero.com/training. And don't keep all this knowledge to yourself. Share this episode with your special education teacher friends who could use some motivation and inspiration. One more thing before you go. If you're finding this podcast helpful and want to show support, head to Apple Podcasts and leave your rating and review. Until next time, keep teaching, taskboxing, and inspiring.